Benaifer Paula Fernandes, and you might be wondering why she has such a non-Indian sounding name. Our first speaker, according to my naive ideas, has a very Indian name. She doesn't, and that has to do that she's coming from an area that is a bit like Macau, so a kind of Portuguese colony that was then later taken over by India, and people are often having kind of Portuguese sounding names, so like in her case. She is also obviously also from the Center for Neural and Cognitive Science in the University of Hyderabad, same big area where you lose yourself, and she's obviously working with Mishra and also on the project that you have already seen a little bit about, namely on literacy. She's very active in applying theory to the real world, you might say, which is sometimes or oftentimes not very something that we typically encounter. So I was rarely involved in anything having to do with the real life, and most of the phenomena that I'm studying is also very, very farly remote from that, and that also has good reasons. So I'm certainly defending experimental sciences, which are laboratory based a lot, but this is not the only thing that we should do, and she is involved in many of these other things that should also happen. Because at some point, I always will defend theory, but at some point theory has to be hitting the real world to see whether it is really as good as we think. So she's busy in a project on literacy in women of any age, as we have seen, so not in children typically, not at the typical age where people learn languages, so this creates many problems, as we have heard some, we may hear about others. And we thought this might be an interesting contribution because it gives us a bit more realistic view on how science has an impact on everyday life. And this is the more general theme of these series of lectures. So let's see what she has to say, please.
Thank you so much, Professor. So my topic today is Research in India, an overview, and I will link this to the literacy project that we did at our lab. As Professor Amish Kumar Mishra mentioned, this was a longitudinal study that we conducted over a span of 3 years, and we did it on a group of bilingual illiterates from a nearby village near the university. And we trained them over a period of 1 year in reading and writing, and we wanted to see what the impact of this basic education on their daily life. That was the main aim of this project. So I will just go through an overview of how the educational institutions in India function, the funding bodies, the IOE fund that we received for this particular project, and at the end I will discuss the case study of the entire project. So at this point in time, as of 2024, only 70% of our Indian population is literate, which means that only 70% can read and write. The remaining 30% remain illiterate, and this remains a concern for our country. Now, when we received independence back in 1947, we had only 16% literacy and barely a few 30 colleges in India. Today we are down to 350, and that's why we have a very hierarchical pyramid structure of our educational institutions, and we follow the British curriculum, which focuses mostly on education in English and a more modern perspective to education. So we study a lot of science, a lot of history and geography in school, and the local languages. So our educational institutions begin with provincial colleges, which are the smaller colleges in smaller cities, and these are the colleges that students go to immediately after they finish schooling. So they are roughly age 14, and then we move down to the state and central universities, which are funded by the state government and the central government. Admission into these universities is slightly competitive, but fairly easy for most people to get through based on their education. The more competitive ones are the IITs and IIMs, which is the Indian Institute of Technology and the Indian Institute of Management, where students prepare and spend a lot of their time preparing for entrance exams. And then the IISc and ISER, which is the Indian Institution of Science, Education and Research. We also have private institutions which are government aided and unaided. Now, so these educational institutions are funded differently. Some are funded by the state and central governments, but we also have to apply for grants to conduct research in these universities, because of which we have a lot of funding bodies that have interest in scientific research and academic research. We have highlighted the ones where we have taken grants from at our lab, which is Department of Science and Technology, DST, which is particularly interested in science and tech research. They are also into medical sciences, and the ICMR, the Indian Council of Medical Research, which developed the COVID vaccine in India. They played a very crucial role in developing the vaccine. So we have a lot of funding bodies that do this kind of work. Now, University of Hyderabad is placed in southern India. Professor Kolzato and Homel have visited our campus. It is ranked 17 as per 2024 in the national rankings, and we received the IOE grant. Now, the Institute of Eminence grant is a recognition status given to only 10 private and 10 public universities, and the main aim of this particular grant is to empower them and to put them on a global map. Now, a lot of our universities do a lot of research tirelessly, but do not get the kind of recognition that they deserve. So the IOE project gave them around $1.7 million to do the kind of research to different labs. We are fortunate, we are one of the labs to have received that kind of funding to do the literacy project. So yeah, we received the funding back in 2020, which is nearly coming to an end now. It was for 5 years. I will explain the literacy project. So the literacy project is a longitudinal study of 3 years that was divided on 3 time points, and we had the middle time point was education for these particular participants for 1 year, where we taught them to read and write in their own language. So no English, but their native language, which is Kannada, and Telugu, which is the functional language which they learned to work in Hyderabad. Now, a lot of our participants are migrant workers. They are not originally from Hyderabad, but they left their hometowns, which is in another part of India, to come and work in the city of Hyderabad because of the scope. So, if you see, the area, so this is the particular urban slum where we conducted the study, and this is an entire circle with the university in the center. Now the entire circle, the semicircle, has all high-rise buildings and a lot of development in the past 10 years. The most famous financial district where you lived is right there. So we have Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and a lot of their employees live in the area around here. So this entire area is a very rich, well-to-do area, and then you have this one part of the road that has this population that services and goes to the homes of these people. And works for
My
them.
house is just on the boundary of that area.
Yeah, Professor Mishra lives right near the campus, nearby, a little away from here. But these are the workers that do menial jobs. They come to clean homes, they cook, and they service the remaining part of this area. So we had to get these participants. Now the procedure and the way of getting them was not very easy. It required us to team up with the local politicians and have participant orientation programs. Professor Mishra had to personally address a lot of these participants at a function, and ceremonies are, a more trustworthy way of creating faith in the people. So that required us to do that. We also had our research students go personally to the homes of a lot of these participants, go and speak to them and assure them that we will be educating them for the good, because a lot of them don't trust very easily, because money is their only motive for doing a lot of things. So we had to create this separate rapport with a lot of these participants, and sustaining them for over a period of 3 years was probably our biggest challenge in a study like this. So our study had 80 participants, out of which 70 of them were women and 10 were men. Now the reason for this divide is a lot of our women, even though they start formal education a little early on, if you see 70% of our literacy is women, and we have a slightly higher percentage in males. Women, because of family commitments, because of marriage and childbirth, leave education very early on. So this is the problem of smaller town India, and they get married as early as 14 and 15. It's changing slightly with a little bit of literacy and awareness, but a lot of people still get married really early, and they leave their jobs, they leave education. They are not able to functionally do any jobs apart from just the usual jobs that you do to get by. So that's why it was easier to get female participants, and I think it was a good thing to empower the women, because they are the ones who directly take care of the children, and they are able to, they now have aspirations for their children because they have gained some basic literacy. One of the very first things that we taught our participants to do was how to sign. So the view of literates in India is by their signature. So the ones who are illiterates, they use their thumbprint. So they have a word, they are called Anguta chaps, which is something slightly demeaning, but they are now able to at least tell people that I can sign. And this was through, we had a lot of financial dealings with them to pay them for their attendance at these classes. So that was the very first point for us to teach them some form of identity for themselves, that they learn to sign, and they can show that to people. Okay, so yeah, a lot of them leave because of socioeconomic factors, marriage, family responsibilities, and this is a typical day in a class on the weekends where our teacher, he's also our research student, was involved in teaching them one of the languages. So basics, we gave them a bag with books and pencils, and we got a classroom near their homes. We had to do this also because a lot of them work throughout the day. They do multiple jobs, so they break their time into like 1.5 hour per home, where they clean like big 3 BHK, 1500 square feet apartments, and then they used to have time in between. We used to allocate the classes to them during that time. So yeah, this particular study was conducted on bilingual illiterates from the underprivileged economic background of Gopinagar. 80 participants, the gender ratio 70 to 10, and these people have had no formal education. They are daily wage laborers, house helps. They speak Kannada and Telugu. However, they are very well versed in digital literacy in terms of making payments. They know how to use Google Pay, which is the Indian version of WeChat, and they have adapted slightly in terms of digital literacy in that sense. So, in India, things move slowly, it isn't very fast, so each important phase of the project has taken us 6 months or more. So, the literature review planning of experiments, which was done by Seema, Kirtana, Vaishnavi and Professor Mishra, happened during December 2020 to 2021. Now the hiring and training of project staff was also challenging because we don't get students who are willing to commit 3 years of their time to a longitudinal study like this. It's also very challenging to every day, communicate, coordinate with the participants, get them to come to the university, arrange for the transportation for them, arrange for their meals, have them at the university the entire day. They have, considering they're not literate, they have problem with attention spans, and then if you have to do eye-tracking experiments, it requires us to keep them engaged constantly. So, hiring of training staff, we had one JRF, which was Vaishnavi Mohite, who is a PhD student, who was a PhD student of Professor Mishra, now at IISc Bangalore. So she was the JRF in the project, and then we landed up training multiple students in the data collection. They were also involved in the major different time points of the project. Now recruiting illiterate participants and designing the experiments happened on the go. We had to regularly go to to their homes, get them from their homes, speak to them a lot. There are a few pictures that I will show you, and there's a video as well. It required a lot of rapport building. Now the Ministry of Education approval for the equipment, we got a very good eye tracker by SR Research Canada that was sanctioned in this grant, and I remember the conversation we had yesterday of how long it takes here in China to procure equipment. It's probably a year. It takes long in India as well. If you see the timeline, the sanction was in 2020. We received the equipment only in 2023. So in India, if you are purchasing an equipment that's of very high value, it goes through the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Human Resource Development approval, and that took over a year to come in. That goes to the Vice Chancellor, down to the Finance Officer, to all of our registrars, and at every stage, each of these documents are rechecked and rechecked and rechecked and rechecked. And then all of this combined, it took 3 years to get the equipment. We finally got it in March of 2023, which is when we were able to begin the data collection for the project. And even though the designing of the experiments happened early on, it took us, we had to then concise it and put it into this section and start data collection immediately. Right now we have almost completed the third phase of data collection, and we start analyzing the data. And that's in process at the moment at the lab. Yeah, so this is how a usual day in the project would be like, where a participant walks in. It's around 11 o'clock in the morning, we take their consent, and then we have them at the university, at the lab for over 3 hours. We have 3 to 4 researchers who are dedicatedly handling the logistics, getting them in, picking them up from the gates, getting them into the campus, making them sit, do the entire experiment. So because they did the first phase of the data collection, they were pretty much well versed with what they had to do in the second phase. It was not very difficult, but the more challenging part was in the first phase, where we had to explain to them, and our lab does not have a lot of local people who speak Telugu and Kannada. So we had to have dedicated people to do the data collection who spoke their language. So at the moment we have 3 researchers who are dedicated to collecting the data, and it starts with their linguistic measures. Then we have the manual and the eye tracking experiments. they are in the lab from morning till roughly late afternoon, and once they finish, they go out. The teaching happened over the weekends, so we taught them for 2 hours each on Saturdays and Sundays. We hired teachers, so one of them is our PhD student, Tippeswamy, and then we hired another teacher to teach them in Telugu. This used to happen on the weekends when they had slight free time, because Saturday, Sundays is their off day from work, so they had some time to come and sit through the classes. Yeah, that's what we did for about a year. This is the eye tracker that we purchased, so the Island Duo that we got, and we got the Mencius monitor to do a lot of this analysis because it requires a lot of intensive analyzing of data. The timelines of the sanction date, and when we ultimately got the eye tracker. Okay, so problems faced in this project. Such a study definitely is going to invite a lot of challenges more than problems. So the migrant laborers work on a daily wage. They go to work in the morning, and they are paid for one particular day, which is as little as $2 a day. So even missing one day means that they would not get their meals for that particular day. That's how cut to cut these people live. So the dropout would mean that our sample size goes down, and it was important for us to pay them adequately to conduct such a study. So the amount we paid these participants is equivalent to the amount they'd be paid in 1 month to work at one house, only to come for 8 days in a month for 2 hours a day. 2 hours on the weekend. So long hours of data collection, definitely fatigue. They don't have great attention spans, so it required us to keep them involved constantly, keep talking to them, give them frequent breaks, which of course extended the hours of the data collection. Money being a primary motivator for their participation, we've had issues with the participants in terms of money, because that was we got to know a little later on that was their primary motivation, and it required us to go and speak to them very intensely. For Professor Mishra to regularly go on all of their class days every Saturday and Sunday to speak to them and tell and assure them that we are here to educate you and not for not to exploit you. So a lot of them used to come in only for the money, and then we had to change their opinion on this particular aspect. Finding efficient teachers to teach adult population, it's not easy to find Telugu teachers because everyone wants to teach in English. No one really wants to teach Telugu students, and that to adults. So it was difficult for us to find a teacher. It required a lot of interview sessions, and a lot of them have B.Ed degrees. So B.Ed is a Bachelor's in Education degree that is required for the teachers to teach these kind of courses. So that too was a challenge, because finding a B.Ed teacher along with someone who teaches in Telugu and not in English, because everyone wants English education today, was the challenge. We could not conduct daily classes, of course. It had to be placed on the weekends, and delay in receiving the equipment, 3 years. Challenge in finding a teaching space for the classes. So the university did not allocate any classroom for us to conduct this kind of research, which means that we had to scout for a room, and we had to team up with the local politicians, pay them so that we could have this happen. Professor Mishra even supported that particular person's children's education to have this project happen at the village where we were trying to have, where we wanted to have it. So the challenge in finding teaching spaces is definitely there in India, and delayed payments. The structure of payments, the structure of paying the participants is, the university does not give us advances. So we all have had to put in our personal money, which is huge sums, to kind of pay off these participants, and that has resulted in a lot of delay. But nonetheless, we managed it in the past 1 year because we really wanted this project to happen. The societal impact of having such a project is we get to know at the ground root level what are the expectations of such people in terms of literacy, because they don't have role models, they don't have any aspirations, they've not been shown any paths. So we were able to do that for them, and because of which we had like, the toppers of the class who did very, very well. They expressed their interest in learning English and computers, which Professor Mishra, of course, promised them that he will do. They have become more organized and want to invest more in education. Yes, they want that for their children. It's something they probably wouldn't have aspired for before they could have gotten this basic education, but we were able to give them this aspiration, this hope that we should be educating their children as well. I also see that their social cognition has gotten better. Reason being, these particular participants come to the university, and I would have thought like Indians are very noisy, they chit-chatter a lot, they don't dress up properly, especially with this strata of society. But no, the participants, when they come to the university, they are very, very neatly and well dressed. They follow the decorum, and they are very well organized in their space. So, which I think is an impact of what we have taught them. Prepares them for an evolving job market. Yes, they don't aspire to do these menial jobs anymore. They have asked us that you teach us English and computers and give us a desk job, an office job, even if it means it's a basic administrative paperwork job. But India has such jobs available, so they want to do such jobs. And yes, digital literacy awareness, which is, I recently saw a documentary on digital literacy, and India has a lot of fake news over the internet that keeps moving around, and which is financial scams. So where you just type one link and then it asks you for an OTP. So it leads to a lot of loss of money, because these participants work really hard to earn their daily wages, and they just get scammed overnight. So this is a huge problem in India, that even though they know how to use like Google Pay and basic digital apps, they are illiterate to the finer details of it. Yeah, so this is a glimpse of the training, and this is where we conducted the study in a room here. This is in their village, near their homes. This is Vaishnavi, and these are all our researchers. They used to get their children because they didn't leave them at home. Yeah. So the manpower we trained as a part of this project is Vaishnavi. So Vaishnavi was the JRF. Seema, of course, assisted and helped in the initial phases along with Kirtana. Tippe is one of our teachers who trained them in Kannada. And Ashwini, who is assisting in the data collection and taking care of the analysis. Thank you.
Yeah, if there are one or two at most urgent questions, then we can have it now. No? Then I would suggest that we have a little break and reconvene at 11:15 here with a discussion. All right? Okay.